Thank you very much. We're all so lucky to be here. This is a fantastic event. Thank you, Day of Knowledge, for inviting me. Thank you, Catherine, for that wonderful previous presentation. There's also a subcategory of cartoon pornography, which you didn't mention. Maybe that's the next step in my career. I'll have to talk to her. But the subject of the lecture right now is looking at cartoons as a way to expand our creativity and imagination, and hopefully learn how to overcome our own mental barriers, to leap past the barriers that we have in terms of our own perception, the way that we look at the world. Most of my time as a cartoonist is spent alone in my study, drawing by myself, so this is wonderful to be here in front of you and share my passion for cartoons and show you some of my favorite work. But that's just a self-portrait of how it is most of the time. I usually don't have that music play when I sit down at my drawing desk every day, but it is exciting. This is perhaps my most famous cartoon. I just want to give you some of my work so you know what I do beforehand. Yes, the planet got destroyed, but for a beautiful moment in time, we created a lot of value for shareholders. I'm an environmentalist, as you might be able to tell by that. This cartoon has been very popular. It was shared by Leonardo DiCaprio, Bernie Sanders. It's been used for UN reports on climate change. Gotten millions and millions of shares on social media. And so we're going to keep that in mind as we go through how cartoons work, the different genres of cartoons, and why this is a successful one, why this has seemed to just struck a chord in popular culture, what rules it obeys about cartooning, and what tone it sets in the zeitgeist in the world that we're living in right now. And part of that, just to point out before we get into more specific rules, is cartooning is also very much like writing. You're telling a story. It might not seem like that because it's a single panel, drawing, caption. It seems frozen in time. It's actually part of a continuous narrative. And so when you're thinking about cartoons, think of them as a form of narrative storytelling, of writing. For example, this joke wouldn't work if it didn't have the phrase, "for a beautiful moment in time." The contrast between the apocalyptic landscape that they're sitting in and the poetic nature of "for a beautiful moment in time," waxing poetic about creating value for shareholders when we destroy the world. It's that tension that creates the humor and causes us to laugh. And since it's a great pleasure to be visiting Mexico City, thank you very much for having me. I thought you might appreciate some of my Trump jokes. So here's Donald Trump wandering the White House in his bathrobe late at night, encountering the ghost of Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon says, "I think it's time we have a little chat." Hold on, that's a trash fire. Over there is Trump's inauguration speech. There's a striking similarity between the burning pile of garbage and Donald Trump, you can tell. I used color in this one to highlight the similarities. We mapped out the Trump motorcade route to the White House. We just follow the words KGB for Russian intelligence. You're accidentally debriefing a bowl of mushy oranges and dead canaries. Again, playing on the orange appearance and the fake yellow hair. The most unusual part about this cartoon is that Trump would actually be attending a briefing. There's no way that he would do that. One of my mantras as a humorist and as a cartoonist comes from Jon Stewart, who I'm a huge fan of. Jokes don't work unless they're true. He was being interviewed one time, and I heard it on the radio, where the interviewer tried to get him to admit that he was in fact a journalist. And what he was doing was journalism, all the research they do for The Daily Show, the fact-checking that they do to make sure that their segments are true. And he said, no. What we do rigorous research, not for journalistic purposes, but for comedic purposes. Because jokes don't work unless they're true. And as soon as I heard that, it lit up like a neon sign over my drawing table. That's my mantra from now on. Jokes don't work unless they're true. We take pleasure from jokes and cartoons because they strip away pretense, in a way. They get to the core of an issue, of a situation, of human relationships that is free of pretense, that is unweighted, that is unencumbered, it's very clear. And so as we go through the cartoons today, just keep that in mind. Jokes don't work unless they're true. Even if it's a situation between a husband and a wife arguing over a dinner table, it's not funny unless it points to a core truth about human relationships that we all can. It's the process of getting a joke is both identifying with it and being surprised by the originality of it, by the incongruity that it points out at the same time as you're identifying with it. And it's that tension that causes the humor. So So back to this one. This is the pitch that I did for the Yes, the Planet Got Destroyed cartoon. The story behind this is I wasn't planning to submit cartoons to the New Yorker that week. I happened to have a gap in time when I could create some ideas, so I drew it very, very quickly, and I sent it to them. They bought it. They wanted it that week, so I had to run back home, draw it very quickly, send it in, scan it, and it ended up becoming my most famous work. And there's something about doing something quickly. I was relying on a set of skills that I cultivated over the past 10 years of enduring rejection after rejection after rejection from them that I think I had internalized by that point. And it's those same skills that I was drawing on that I want to try and share with you so that we can all start to think about the world differently and cultivate our own creativity. And also, I wanted to use this to point out there's something about understanding the language of cartoons which will also allow us to understand what is very much the language of modern communication. Look at social media. If you think about social media, it's cartoons. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, image caption. It's very much of a cartoon language that we're living in nowadays, especially on social media. So if we can understand cartoons, we can also understand better how to communicate in the modern world, and I think that's something else to keep in mind as we go through. Part one, how cartoons work. Let's just get to the fundamentals of how they actually work. There's a sort of cartoon grammar that we can learn. This huge construction site, and the workers saying, "Oh, the hell with it," throwing away his wrench. So let's learn how they work, but let's also remember that it's also fun to be a little bit lazy sometimes, and to sit back and relax, and just enjoy cartoons for what they are. But if we look at this one, there's also a tension in it. This enormous construction site, all the industriousness and labor that went into building that, and then you land down there on the worker throwing away his hammer and saying, "Oh, the hell with it." There's a silliness to it that we also have to keep in mind. And there's a famous writer, E.B. White, who was a writer for the New Yorker, he did Charlotte's Web. He said, "Humor is like dissecting a frog. Few people are interested and the frog dies of it." I hope that's not true. We're going to try and prove him wrong tonight. It is notoriously hard to talk about humor because it is very cultural, it's contextual. It depends upon the situation, and it's just hard to understand what ignites that laughter, that spark of laughter in us. But we're going to try to get to the heart of it. So we're going to stick out our tongue at E.B. White for the moment and say, well, maybe we can understand it a little bit better and not lose the pleasure from understanding it. This is the very first cartoon that I sold to the New Yorker after my 609 previous submissions had failed. I had sent in 609 jokes to them week after week after week after week. Finally, this one made it through. That there's one bow-legged cowboy. His legs are so bow-legged you can't even see them underneath the door, right? And I think the reason why this one worked when my other ones had failed is it obeys the most basic rule of cartooning, which is that there has to be some visual incongruity. There's something wrong with the image that you identify very quickly, and you want to know the solution to that. And so you look to the caption for the answer. And the caption provides the levity and the answer to it. And I think that this one also succeeded because there's clarity to it. I would say that probably 99% of the cartoons fail because they're not clear enough. There's a little bit too much packaging around them. There's too much detail. Your eye isn't drawn to the right things at the right moment. You have to understand cartoons in about 0.3 of a second in order for them to really be successful. You can't do too much interpretation. And this one, your eye is drawn right to the empty doorway. It's clear that there should be legs there. Why are there legs there? You go to the caption. There's a clever twist on it. So I think that's why this one succeeded. Here's one that failed for my earlier submissions. It's still pretty good, right? I mean, it's an okay joke. I was a little bit upset that I didn't take this one, to be honest. But I understand why now, because it took too long, right? Your eye isn't immediately told to look at the sand castle that the astronaut is building. All that effort to get to the moon, and what do? You want to sit down in the moon desk and build a sand castle, right? Like that's the joke, but it's not guided in the correct way. And so I wasn't obeying the clarity rule of humor. Here's one that also failed, the 4 stages of idealism. You have your head in the clouds, you have your head in the sand, you have your head up your ass, and then your head is syrup on the fire. It's good too, right? It's pretty good. Thank you for laughing at that, by the way. But it takes decoding, right? And also, so you have to infer what the phrases are from the images. It's just a little bit too long to work as a pure cartoon. Tarantino gets a paper cut. That's another little bit. It's a pop culture reference it takes familiarity with who's Tarantino, he makes bloody movies. Okay, there's like a 3-step process of understanding that, but we all kind of understand that. And then it's also bloody, right? And so you have to know your audience. The New Yorker's never going to publish something like that because it's gore. Other places might, Playboy might, National Lampoon might, other places like that. But know your audience. You know, I think that's something to keep in mind. All humor is contextual. There's no joke that you can send to an alien species and they'll get it because it's funny. It requires a commonality of understanding, and it requires understanding who your audience is you're trying to please. The specific audience for me is this guy. That's Bob Mankoff. He recently retired. He was the cartoon editor of the New Yorker. He will look at 1,000 pitches a week. Of those 1,000, he'll winnow them down to 30. He takes those 30 to see the head editor, David Remnick, and David Remnick will choose 15. So during the course of a week, you're competing from going for 1,000 to try to get one of those 15 slots. And so know your audience is very important in this particular context. But for all of us, we understand that at an intuitive level, right? The joke that you tell with your friends in the bar is going to be different than the joke that you tell with your family over dinner. You know, and so you have to know your audience in that sense. The audience has now changed. Emma Allen is now the new cartoon editor of the New Yorker. She's 28 years old. She was the humor editor for the online content. Now she also handles cartoons. And with her, there's also come a cultural shift in the magazine. A month ago, it was the first magazine in the New Yorker's 90-year history that had more women cartoonists published in it than men. For the first time in 90 years. And so we're changing. We're changing, we're evolving. So how do I center different ideas? And I put the Bob Mankoff, of course I do. And so we all have to adapt to our changing culture. There's still a lot of this. All the feedback that you get could just amount to no, right? It's a polite way of saying no. How do we get from no to yes? And I think that's where we're trying to get to. So I want to look at some of those rules. I'm just going to make sure that I didn't leave anything out. Like I said, I'm a cartoonist. I draw mostly. It's very fun to give a lecture that I don't have all memorized. Luckily, there are much smarter people than me who have also examined this problem, one of them being Italo Calvino. Right before he died in the 1980s, he was getting ready to give a series of lectures at Harvard University called 6 Memos for the New Millennium, where he identified what were the most important elements to him in good literature that is enduring. He claimed it was specific to literature. I think it also applies to cartoons. So I'm going to take 3 of those rules that he outlined and say that they also work extremely well for understanding cartoons. And later, he also admitted to reading almost exclusively cartoons in his youth when he was growing up. So I think he also knows something or two about cartoons. The first element is lightness. The scene in which Don Quixote drives his lance through the sail of a windmill and is hoisted up into the air takes only a few lines in Cervantes' novel, which we all know is a big novel. In spite of this, it remains one of the most famous passages in all of literature. Lightness. The sense of lightness is good in both literature and in cartoons. Here's a sense of liberty, right? What I love about this cartoon is the second panel, the slight bend of the knee, right? There's just a slight bend of the knee. That's the only physical change that occurs between panel 1 and 2 is just this. And then he's leapt 50 feet into the air in the third panel. The lightness in that. There's a reason why another word for humor is levity, right? The sense of unweightedness is very, very important. Quickness is the second element. Mental speed is valuable for its own sake, for the pleasure that it gives to anyone who is sensitive to such a thing, and not for the practical use that can be made of it. The speed, like I mentioned, it takes about 0.3 of a second, is about the time that we have to understand a cartoon, reading the image, and then being curious about what the caption will unlock for us, in order for it to be pleasurable. If you're given too much time, the suspension of disbelief, the levity that is created, relaxes, and there's not as much tension there. So the quickness of interpretation is very fun. Touche. Right? There's a sense of rapidity, right? There's just the quickness of it. They're fighting. The way that it's drawn is fast. The decapitation is fast, and the caption is only one word. It all happens very quickly, and so we can enjoy it. We're not given time to feel sorry for the person who was just beheaded. Right? And also, he's still conscious, and so he's not dead yet, so we don't feel so bad for him. But the quickness is very important in humor as well. The third element, exactitude. Exactitude means three things above all: a well-defined and well-calculated plan for the work in question, an evocation of clear, incisive, memorable visual images, a language as precise as possible in both choice of words, and an expression of the subtleties of thought and imagination. Which is a long-winded way of saying balance. There has to be a sense of balance in the composition in order to enjoy it. There can't be too much, nothing can be out of proportion. Balance is incredibly important to getting a cartoon. We immediately understand the context, the characters involved. There's just a table lamp, books, the hint of a desk, and the fact that these bookends have suddenly become animate. And they're not just holding the books up, they've been engaged in this eternal battle of pushing each other, and one of them won the day. Bringing to life inanimate objects is also one of the great pleasures of cartoons. And also putting words into animals and methods, and we'll get to that, that'll come later. Making animals speak is one of the true pleasures of cartoons. But the balance of this composition, it's not encumbered with extraneous detail, right? We get it right away. And lightness, quickness, and exactness doesn't necessarily mean that you can't draw an incredibly lush cartoon. Quickness doesn't mean that you can't also indulge in making a really vivid, beautiful image. We understand this one very quickly too. A scuba diver going down and seeing a bath plug at the bottom of the ocean. That's incredibly clever. It's the incongruities are all created there. And it has no words to it, which is the Platonic ideal of what a cartoon should be. The incongruity is created in the image, and it's also answered within the image itself. It's an absolutely beautiful cartoon by Charles Adams. He's saying, "It's all right, I just tripped on the last step." I love this one because it creates the absolute perfect lead-in. The height of it is very important, right? We're given to believe that he's stumbled down all those steps there is to how high is it? Well, it's as high as a waterfall. That's why the waterfall is important as a reference point, understanding how far he might have plunged. But it's just the last step. No one was hurt. You know, there's still a sense of lightness to it, and it's very surprising. And it's a totally identifiable setup. There's nothing outlandish about it, right? It's something that we could experience ourselves. Miss Hammond, I know you anywhere from Little Billy's portrait of you. The parent actually looks like the way the kid draws in an elementary school, right? So the kid is actually a very accurate artist. And the other thing that's great about cartoons, and this is a good example of it, is it obeys all those rules. It's light, there's a levity to it, it's quick, we can read the image very quickly and understand it, and there's an exactness to it, it's in balance. We don't need to see the desks, we don't need to see the windows, we don't need to see the other parents leaving and this person arriving. It's all there for us, we understand. And it also tells a larger story, it's a narrative. As soon as we get this joke, we wonder what their home life is like. Is her husband also drawn that way? What does the kid look like? You know, there's a life beyond this single panel, which indicates, and there's pleasure in the sort of surmising that you do from a good cartoon, which is another thing to keep in mind. Here's a cartoon that I did that I think disobeys those rules, and that's why I wanted to show it. Tell the truth, Ezra. Does it look like he's being a more effective parent than me? You don't actually care about solving the conflict between the kids. You just want to appear like a good parent in public. Not only a good parent, but the best parent in the playground, right? That's what's important. There's a little too much detail, right? I kind of embellished this one a little bit too much. It disobeys those rules. Or I should be drawn more quickly to the broken toys so that we understand that there's a conflict that they're trying to resolve. I think I broke the rules in this one, and it's okay to do that even if you're a professional occasionally. My husband will be home at any moment. Quick, take the accordion. This one I think is there's a little bit too much detail, but it works because it hides the accordion, and then once you read the joke, you look back to the picture to understand what she's referring to. And and then you notice the music stand by the accordion. He clearly takes his accordion playing very seriously, and she can't stand it. And what is the truth of this joke? It's a joke about relationships. It's a joke about marriages. What you'll tolerate within a marriage over years and years and years for the person that you love. They're very passionately in that accordion playing. And it points to a larger story. And even though she's tied up and there's a burglar in her home, we don't feel worried for her because she's not worried for herself. She's most concerned about getting rid of that accordion. So there's a lightness to it. Auto reply. I am dead and will have limited access to email. He's texted whoever it is in the grave to say, goodbye, great uncle, I miss you very much, and he received an auto reply saying I'm dead. And I will have limited access to email. Again, that goes back to the sort of writing part where, it's the word limited is what the entire joke hinges on. Not that I will not have an email because I'm dead. I'll have limited access to email, I don't know. Maybe I'll have more in heaven, maybe I'll have more access in hell if I went to hell. Hell could just be responding to email all day. And here's one that I did, Shoelace, the movie. I tried variations of this where there were fewer cats in the audience, there was just like a scattered audience of cats. It's more funny that it's a blockbuster, right? The cats have showed up in droves to see this most popular summer blockbuster movie. This is the equivalent of the Avengers for cats. And it's just a 2-hour shot of a shoelace. Because that is dramatic tension for cats. But again, it obeys the grammar of cartoons. Why is there... We first get that it's a cinema. Why is it a shot of a shoelace? That doesn't make any sense. Then your eye is guided down and you see the ears of the cats. And you understand, oh, that's what a movie is of cats. Here's a great one by Charles Adams. You try to solve it, right? Like your mind is like, okay, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way the tracks spin around the tree. Did they take one ski off and kind of balance and reattach on the other side? Like, what's going on here? And that's the joy of cartooning. It makes the impossible possible for a moment, right? Our logical mind demands one thing, and the imagination has to supply another. And this can only be a cartoon, which is why it's such a brilliant image. And if we can think about things in this way, then we can also start to resolve the impossibilities that we see around us. We can think more imaginatively about ways to get around things. Another one without a caption. This one I love because it points to the narrative, right? It took a while for that shower to fill up. So what was she doing while he was clearly screaming for help until this moment, right? Maybe she was very involved in her purifying routine. Is this their honeymoon? What's going on here? And what's going to happen when she opens the shower? It's going to come flooding out, And so this points to the idea of the narrative. And also, she only has 4 fingers on her left hand, and he has 6 on his left hand. So you don't have to be a perfectionist to get the goat across. We don't pay attention to that kind of thing. There's a sense of quickness in it, too. This is one of the most elegant examples that I can think of a way to depict, in a very humane, gentle way, the different outlooks in life between secular and religious people. Right? They're all on a plane together, everyone's looking down, enjoying the landscape. The priest is looking up, reveling in being closer to God. Right? It's not a commentary, it's not polemical in any way. There's no opinion given about which is the correct outlook. It's just elegant, beautiful, and funny. There's a sense of lightness, and there's nothing else there that you need. The only thing that's colored in is so that we understand the priest's robe. People in line at an information desk, and they're formed in a question mark, as all of them have a question. Again, it obeys all those rules. Lightness, quickness, exactitude. The balance of it is perfect. The road workers were busy painting the line. They stopped at the bar and grill and probably had a few too many Bloody Marys. The narrative is beautiful, and this is an example of the way that you read the cartoon. We read the cartoon like we read a book, left to right. Imagine if it was flipped. If the line was going down this way and the bar and grill was on the right-hand side and the line was coming toward us. It might also work. But there's something about the squiggly line vanishing into the horizon that is so wonderful because it leads you to think, okay, well, how long did they make that mistake? It guides you forward, whereas if it was coming toward us, there would be sort of a more limit to where it ended. This gives us an ellipsis at the end. Our imagination can go on forever. I love this one. And here's an example of it's very carefully constructed because what if we just do this? It's less funny. And not only because we've already seen it, it's just less funny because you land on the violence. The violence is the last thing you see in the read. It's what you're left with. It's the final impression you're left with. In this version, the final thing you're left with is this woman tidying up all the gun casings, all the bullet casings. It ends on a gentle note. It ends on a light note, whereas this one ends on a heavy note. It ends on the gun battle. And so that's the kind of tonal thing that you have to pay attention to. The cartoon editor Bob Mankoff gives a metaphor for good humor where there's always a little bit of danger, of transgression involved in good humor and good cartooning. And he uses the metaphor of a zoo, so I'm going to steal that from him. This is a good zoo. This is a bad zoo. There's no danger there. This is a worse zoo. It's too much, it's too in our face, right? There's too much danger. It's not kept in a safe remove. The line has been transgressed. We haven't found the balance. So as you're learning to communicate things in an entertaining, humorous way, to do cartoons like this, find that line. Find the line of transgression. Don't go too far, and don't be sort of innocuous. Don't be too gentle. Find the line of where it's acceptable. And here's some cartoons that have succeeded in finding that line of transgression. Well, back to the old drawing board. There is danger here. There's a plane crash. There's smoke is the first thing we're drawn to, the fact that there was a crashed plane. We see the parachuter next. The pilot survived, okay. The pilot's safe. Everyone is rushing toward the help. There's an ambulance. And then our eye settles on the designer of the airplanes, the draftsman, who's coming away from us while everyone else is running toward the crash. He's coming away from the crash. Well, back to the old drawing board. He's actually reveling in the idea of getting to design a better airplane. He's happy that it has crashed. And that's the final impression that we're left with. It has the danger, but it's a good zoo. The danger is relieved for us. George, drop the keys. There's so much going on in this cartoon. Her husband has been carried away by some enormous bird, which is like this mythological bird that is descended out of nowhere. He's being carried away to what we presume will be his death. And she is reminding him to drop the car keys because she's going to be stuck on the beach. That's a commentary on marriage if there ever was one. And but it has the right line of transgression. We're not actually worried about him. We see him only in shadow. And we totally understand her point of view. And her point of view is the one that we are wedded to in the cartoon. Now we're tiptoeing close to the cage, right? Now the tiger is pacing behind the bars. And, it's funny. It's still funny. That was a little bit of an uncomfortable laugh, though, right? We're giving each other permission to laugh. Did you wait for the person next to you to laugh before you laughed? It's very politically correct, though. Everyone needs access to the gallows. And we're going a little bit further. There's a tree that has a cross-section of a stake. We're going a little bit further in a different way. And now I think we've finally gone too far. This cartoon was published despite Hannah Wilson in Playboy. Playboy has a different limit of transgression than the New Yorker does, of course. A man alone in an apocalyptic landscape saying, "I think I won." We get it, right? You get what the joke is supposed to be there, but there's nothing to relieve it. There's no outside perspective on it. And I think that's why it's a little bit too much. It's a lion out of the cage. We're not given enough to laugh about. There's not enough lightness to it. Generating your own ideas. Don't worry, there's not going to quiz at the end of this. I won't ask you to come up and draw your own cartoon. That's because there are no original ideas. No joke has been told for the first time. That might seem like a catch-22, a chicken and the egg kind of thing. We're all relying on a common menu of cultural references, of tropes, of topics that have come before, a lineage of humor and cartoons that we're working within. Here's Edgar Allan Poe thinking of a pig saying nevermore, a moose saying nevermore, a tortoise saying nevermore. This is a joke about Poe coming up with the Raven. It's also a joke about the cartoon brainstorm process. We're riffing on a common theme, trying to find what the best version of it is. Here's a thought bubble cartoon that I did. We can all identify with that, right? The idea that comes to you in the dead of night, and the pillow is just too warm. You don't want to get up. You don't want to leave your bed and write it down. Many ideas have been lost that way. What is the joke here? The joke is the thought bubble is actually the full chord of light itself. So I'm playing on the construction of things. I'm taking this thought bubble motif that Charles Adams sort of originated, and I'm putting my own spin on it. And I do another idea joke later on. What if a bug had an idea and the light bulb drew into it like bugs are drawn to lights and he actually died because of it? So you're riffing on a common menu of themes, even ones that you yourself have tackled before. It's not about coming up with an entirely unique, unprecedented, original concept. It's about identifying what your own perspective on something is. It's about finding your voice in what is all understood among everybody. And here's another version of it. God's reading light. When he's done with a little story, out goes the universe. I wonder what book he's reading. I don't know. I did not have that in mind. I did another one like this, about the hourglass. So obsessed with trying to preserve whatever remaining time is left that you're actually wasting time, right? You're becoming occupied with preserving time instead of actually living. This didn't come out of the blue for me. This one was published before, 20 years before I published mine. And that's the own artist's different take on it, right? That's their own perspective. I tend to find mortality very funny. This person finds it funny, but in a different way. Someone just relaxing in the beach umbrella, letting time drip through the hourglass. And here's another one. What happens to all the time that goes through the hourglass? Well, maybe it has a consciousness in and of itself and it creates a sandcastle. So again, don't worry about repeating something. Find your own perspective on it. And it can be frustrating, as this cartoon communicates by George Booth. Caveman seeing the antelope being super inspired, running back to the cave, slashing away at the cave wall, and being disappointed in the results and giving up. That happens to all of us. Don't let it prevent you from getting forward. Like I said, it took me 609 submissions before the New Yorker bought the very first one. And even today, on a good year, I'll submit 500 ideas and they'll buy 15. And that's a super successful year. And when it comes to your style, that's not a limitation either. There's a rule of thumb that I like to tell people who ask me for advice on how to do cartoons. A good joke can be drawn any number of ways. A good drawing cannot save a bad joke. You can't draw your way out of it. The idea is what is paramount. The style can be anything. This is Charles Adams' style. The Addams Family pouring molten lava on Christmas carolers. Or there's this style that we already saw, touche. The style is not the limitation, it's just how you draw into the idea that you're trying to communicate. The person who drew that, James Thurber, had a quote about his own writing. Don't get it right, just get it written. Just do it. Express yourself at all costs. And allow yourself to change over time. Pay attention to how you as a person are observing the world differently, how you're maturing. Let your style mature also. Bob Mankoff, this is how he drew a chair joke in the 1970s. A lion in a cloth chair that also has a tail. That's funny. This is how he drew a chair in the 90s, 20 years later. He pared it down, he evolved as a person, he changed as a person, and so his style changed. Budget your planet. I mean, it's a really funny joke. And so let's look at how artists interpret the same theme, the theme of art. An intermission in a museum. Sit down, take a break. The painting being so intense that it actually casts a shadow, the painting of a sunset. Beautiful, can only live in a cartoon, right? A joke that depends on 3 lines. You know, you might not, imagine that with removing the horizon of the corner. You might not even know that the painting was bent. It's Gorgeous That Way by Saul Steinberg. the economical artist. Just paint one big landscape and chop it up. The muse actually keeping you away from your work. This one appeared in Playboy. Tickling the artist. Tickling the model, rather. This one is a little bit hard to see on the stage. All this abstract art, and the curator is drawn toward the painting of a nude woman. Someone actually being trapped inside their own portrait by Gavin Wilson. So just imagine all the things you can do with a simple frame. You know, I have a couple of other projects I'm excited about. And when in doubt, just have cats talk. Because cats are hilarious, I know. But this is also beautiful, right? That must be how it feels. And we all have those projects, those things that we kind of keep to ourselves, and yet they're beautiful, and we love them, and we keep working away at them. He's done it all. There's nothing left to draw. That's how it's always felt. That's how it's always felt. That's how it feels to me at the beginning of every week. I'm totally dried up. And then I'll leaf through cartoons. I'll give myself homework assignments. Okay, I haven't drawn a pumpkin one for a while. I haven't drawn a Frankenstein one for a while. Oh, everyone's done this before. And then something will hatch loose. And sometimes it just takes tipping it on its side. Tip the chair over, add a caption. Just tilt your head. Look at the world at a slight slant. Sure-footed little beasts, aren't they? Well, that's not funny. That's because that's not the joke. The joke was published like this. Sure-footed little beasts, aren't they? Just tip the horizon line. Just tip your head. Look at something slightly askew. Look at something askance. Now we're going to practice a little bit. And remember, whatever you have to contribute, it can be beautiful. The sneeze happens to be exactly the note that they needed for their playtime, right? Don't feel limited by not feeling like what you have to contribute is necessarily good enough. You can find an audience. So let's see, given the rules that we've learned, if we can just quickly try and anticipate what these jokes might be. The quickness, the exactness, the levity of it, the balance, and what is presented to us, how this artist sees the world. A man at his typewriter on the deck, and his wife is saying to him, what could she possibly be saying? Write about dogs. The material is right under your nose. It's right there. All you have to do is unlock it. It's a French army knife. The only thing the French army is concerned with is opening the bottle of wine, right? It's the only contingency they should be prepared for. What could this one possibly be saying? Our eye is clearly drawn to the top. All the attention is upward and drawn to the top. What is he saying? What's a funny spin on that? The hell of it is, I've forgotten what they're reaching for. He spent so much time on the base, and he forgot what was on the base. A man who loves butterflies, and he's cocooned behind his butterfly desk. His butler is saying, I'm sorry, sir, but Professor Dornley does not wish to be disturbed for the duration of the winter. We think maybe a butterfly escaped and wrapped him up. He actually wrapped himself up. He wants to be in the cocoon. He's become so identified with the subject. Clearly, there's a visual rhyme going on here. We know it's going to be some, because the artist has presented it to us in such a clear way, obeying all those rules. We know there's a relationship going on here. What is the right answer? I don't care if she is a cake dispenser. I love her. Beautiful one. Here's one that I did. It appeared in the back page of the New Yorker. You know they have the caption contest, where they receive tens of thousands of submissions for people to try and come up with a caption to this image. Here were the 3 winning ones, or the 3 finalists, rather. I can tell you exactly what he was compensating for. If I knew Larry, it's hollow inside. Costco. And the winning one ended up being, I can tell you exactly what he was compensating for, which is probably the funniest of the 3, but they're all pretty good. And the lesson is that there is no actual one right answer. You know, you can interpret that in any number of ways, and they can all be very joyful and offer your own spin on them. So don't think that you have to decode it perfectly. It's not mathematics. It's very subjective. And ultimately, This, to me, this is the final slide. This, to me, is what cartooning is. There's one piece left. There's one gap left. It doesn't fit, but it has to fit. It has to fit. It's the last piece, but it doesn't, but it has to fit. Your logical mind demands one thing. Your imagination is forced to supply another thing. How did it end up like this? How can it fit? And I think that's a good one to leave on, because hopefully we'll all find ways to make that final piece fit in our own way. Thank you.